The man lived in a world of quiet. His home was a huge apartment on the very top floor of the tallest building in the city. From his windows he could see the whole world below, a glittering map of tiny cars and bright lights. But he never felt a part of it. He was a man who had built an empire from nothing, a king in a castle of his own making. His name was on office buildings and shipping containers that crossed oceans, but in his own home his name was rarely spoken. He lived alone, and he liked it that way. Everything had its place. The white sofas were always perfectly fluffed. The glass tables shone without a single fingerprint. The only sounds were the soft hum of the air conditioning and the quiet tick of a large, expensive clock on the wall. It was less like a home and more like a very beautiful, very empty museum. But 5 years ago, a small, unexpected thing had happened. A piece of the noisy, messy world outside had found its way inside his quiet castle. Her name was Chloe. He had not planned to become a father. The idea had never fit into his neat and orderly life. But he had known Chloe's parents long ago, before life had been so cruel to them. When they were gone, there was no one else. The choice for him was simple. He could not let a child be lost to the system. So he brought her home. He provided for her in the only way he knew how. He gave her a large, sunlit bedroom filled with every toy she could ever want. He hired a kind, gentle woman to come during the day to teach her and care for her. Her clothes were the finest, her books were the most beautiful. He made sure she was safe, healthy, and educated. In his mind, this was love. Love was a roof. Love was security. Love was giving someone everything they needed so they would never have to worry. But a child needs more than things. Chloe, now 7 years old, was a burst of color in his gray world. Where he was quiet, she was full of sounds. Singing to herself, chattering to her toys, her footsteps a light pitter-patter on the polished floors. She had bright, curious eyes that noticed everything. She noticed that her father's smiles were small and quick, like a flash of sun on a cloudy day. She noticed that his hugs were brief, a single pat on the back before he let go. She noticed the deep silence that settled over the apartment when her tutor left for the day. She loved her father. She knew in a way that children just know, that he was a good man, but she felt a lonely space inside her, a space that toys and pretty dresses could not fill. She would sometimes look at the pictures in her storybooks, at families laughing around a dinner table, moms brushing hair, dads swinging children in the air, and a small, quiet sigh would escape her. She didn't have the words for what she was missing, only a feeling. The man, for his part, would watch her from a distance. He saw the beautiful, smart girl she was becoming, and it filled him with a pride he did not know how to express. He wanted to connect with her, to bridge the quiet gap between them, but he was a man who spoke the language of business and logic. He did not know the language of play, of silliness, of simple, quiet togetherness. His attempts felt clumsy, like trying to use a key in the wrong lock. Their evenings were the quietest time. They would eat dinner at the long, formal dining table, seated far apart from each other. The only sounds were the clinking of their knives and forks on the expensive plates. He would ask her questions like, "Did you complete your mathematics lesson?" Or, "Is your tutor satisfied with your progress?" And she would answer with a soft, "Yes, Papa," before the silence fell again. He saw the way her shoulders would sometimes slump, the way the light in her eyes would dim just a little during these meals. It worried him. He was solving a problem, but he couldn't find the solution. He had given her everything. What more could there be? He did not understand that the very things he provided, the safety, the space, the silence, had also built invisible walls. He was a solitary tycoon living in a gilded cage of his own creation. And now, he had unknowingly placed his beloved daughter inside it with him. They were together yet profoundly alone, two souls orbiting each other in a vast quiet space, waiting for something, or someone, to show them the way out. The big day was coming up. In 1 week, the little girl would turn 7 years old. The man had been thinking about it for a long time. He wanted to get her something truly special, something that would show her just how much he cared. He wanted to see her whole face light up with a joy that would last. One evening, after her tutor had left and the quiet of the apartment settled around them like a blanket, he decided to ask her. He found her in her room, carefully arranging her dolls on the window seat. She looked so small and serious in the evening light. He stood in the doorway for a moment, clearing his throat. She looked up, her big eyes curious. Come sit with me for a moment, he said, his voice softer than he used it on the phone for business. She followed him to the large white sofa in the living room. They sat at opposite ends, a wide space between them. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together. Your birthday is next week, he began. I have been thinking. I want to give you a wonderful gift. Something you will always remember. He paused, wanting to build a little excitement. He had made a list of possibilities, each one grander than the last. I was thinking, he said, a small proud smile on his face. We could take a trip. We could fly to Paris, you could see the Eiffel Tower. We could eat croissants by the river. What do you think of that? He watched her face, expecting to see wonder and delight. Instead, she just blinked. She didn't smile. She slowly shook her head, her braids swaying gently. No, thank you, Papa, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He was surprised. Maybe she was too young for Paris. Maybe she wanted something more fun. All right then, he said, trying again. What about a pony? A beautiful, gentle pony of your very own. We could build a stable for it in the country. You could learn to ride it. You could name it anything you like. This, he was sure, was the dream of every little girl. He pictured her riding through a field, laughing. But again she looked down at her hands in her lap. She shook her head once more. No, thank you, she repeated, a little firmer this time. A small knot of worry tightened in his stomach. Had he misunderstood her completely? Was there nothing in the whole wide world that she wanted? He felt a little lost, like he was trying to read a map in a language he didn't understand. Then tell me, he said, his voice gentle but confused. What would make you happy? You can have anything you want. Just tell me what it is. She looked up then, and her eyes met his. They were full of a hope so bright and fragile it almost hurt to look at. She took a small breath, gathering her courage. I want to go to a real restaurant, she said. A proper one. Like the families on television. With the red chairs and the big menus. I want to go out. With you. Her words hung in the quiet air between them. For a long moment the man couldn't speak. He was completely stunned. Of all the things she could have asked for, of all the grand and expensive gifts in the world, this was what she wanted? A simple meal at a restaurant? It seemed so small, so ordinary. He had imagined giving her the world, and she had asked for a single evening. But as he looked at her face, he saw it wasn't about the food or the fancy chairs. It was in the way she said, with you. Those two words held all the longing she couldn't otherwise express. She didn't want a monument or a pony. She wanted an experience. She wanted to be out in the world with him, to be seen together, to be a normal father and daughter for one night. His heart felt heavy and light at the same time. He felt a pang of sadness that something so simple could mean so much to her. But he also felt a surge of love and determination. This was a request he could fulfill. It was easy. He leaned forward, and for the first time in a long time he gave her a real, warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then that is exactly what we will do, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. We will go to the best, most proper restaurant in the whole city. Just you and me. The change in her was instant and magical. It was like someone had switched on a bright, sunny light inside her. A huge, beautiful smile spread across her face, showing the little gap between her front teeth. She didn't just look happy. She glowed. She clapped her hands together softly and let out a little giggle of pure joy. Really, Papa? Really? She asked, bouncing slightly on the sofa cushion. Really, he said, and the word felt good and true. For the rest of the week, the apartment felt different. The quiet wasn't so heavy anymore. It was filled with a happy anticipation. The little girl would hum to herself as she played. She would ask her tutor what kind of food they might have at a fancy restaurant. She practiced her best manners. The man, for his part, threw himself into the planning. This was something he understood, research and execution. He would find the perfect place. He called his assistant and had him compile a list of the city's most exclusive, most highly rated restaurants. He read reviews and looked at menus online. He finally settled on one called Le Jardin. The pictures showed a beautiful room with sparkling chandeliers, white tablecloths, and serious-looking waiters. It was famous for its French food and its impeccable service. It was without a doubt the best. It was perfect. He made a reservation for the finest table. He arranged for a private car to take them. He felt a sense of purpose. He was going to give his daughter the most perfect restaurant experience anyone had ever had. He was sure that this, finally, would be the key that unlocked the door between them. He pictured the whole evening. The elegant food, the quiet music, his daughter's impressed and happy face. It was going to be perfect. The night of the dinner arrived. The little girl stood in her room, wearing the beautiful new dress her father had bought for the occasion. It was a deep blue color with a soft, silky sash. She felt like a princess in a storybook. She carefully smoothed the fabric down, her heart beating with a nervous excitement. Her father knocked gently on her door and came in. He was wearing a very sharp, dark suit and a tie. He looked important and serious, like he was going to a big meeting. He looked at her and gave a small, approving nod. "You look very nice," he said. "Thank you, Papa," she whispered, her smile a little tight with nerves. The car ride to the restaurant was quiet. The little girl pressed her face against the cool window, watching the city lights blur past. Her father sat beside her, checking his phone once, then putting it away, as if remembering he wasn't supposed to be working. He glanced at her, wanting to say something to start the conversation he hoped they would have. But the words felt stuck. He simply patted her knee gently. "It will be a wonderful evening," he said. When they arrived at Le Jardin, it was even grander than the little girl had imagined. Huge, heavy doors were opened for them by a man in a uniform. Inside, it was like stepping into another world. The air was cool and smelled of flowers and something rich and buttery. The lights were low, coming from glittering chandeliers that hung from a high-painted ceiling. The tables were far apart, covered in stark white cloths, and each one had a tiny, flickering candle in a glass holder. The sound was a low murmur of quiet voices and the soft clink of glasses. There was no laughter, no loud talking. It was beautiful, but it was a scary kind of beautiful. It felt like a church or a library. A tall, serious man led them to their table. The little girl's chair was heavy, and a waiter had to help push it in for her. She felt very small sitting in it. The table was so wide she could barely see her father clearly over the top of the large menu, and the flower arrangement between them. He looked at her from across the table. "This is very nice, isn't it?" he said, his voice sounding a bit too loud in the quiet room. She just nodded, her eyes wide. He picked up the heavy menu. "Now let's see what we should order. I hear the foie gras is excellent to start, and for the main course the filet mignon is the specialty." She didn't know what those words meant. She looked at her own menu. The words were in fancy, swirly writing and mostly in French. She couldn't read any of it. She felt a knot of panic in her stomach. This wasn't like the restaurants on TV where families were laughing and sharing plates of spaghetti. The silence started to grow again, just like it did at home, but here it felt worse because they were surrounded by people. Her father, sensing the quiet was becoming awkward, tried to fill it. "So," he began, folding his hands on the table, "how are your studies progressing? Is your tutor covering multiplication yet?" The little girl looked down at her lap. This was the same question he asked at home. She mumbled a quiet, "Yes, Papa." "That's good," he said. "Very important." And then the conversation died again. He tried another topic. "The driver mentioned the weather might turn cold next week. We must make sure you have a proper winter coat." She just nodded, playing with the corner of her napkin, which she had unfolded onto her lap. The hope and excitement she had felt all week were starting to shrink, replaced by a familiar heavy disappointment. Her shoulders began to slump. The beautiful dress didn't feel so magical anymore. She was just a little girl in a very quiet, very big room, feeling more alone than ever. It was at that moment that their server approached the table. She was a woman with a warm, friendly face and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. She moved with a calm energy, not stiff and formal like the other staff. She stopped at their table and did something no one else had done. She didn't just look at the man. She turned her attention directly to the little girl. And then she did something truly remarkable. She didn't stand over her. She bent her knees slightly, lowering herself so that she was at the girl's eye level. Her voice was warm and gentle like a soft blanket. "Well, hello there," she said, her eyes twinkling in the candlelight. "My, what a stunning dress you are wearing. That blue is just the perfect color for you." The little girl's head lifted. She looked into the woman's face. No one here had spoken directly to her like that. A tiny, shy smile touched her lips. The woman then looked at the confusing menu in the girl's hands. "Oh, that thing is full of big, silly words, isn't it?" she said with a friendly wink, as if they were sharing a secret. "Let me tell you what's really good. The chef makes these little garlic butter pastries that are so light, they just might float away. We call them our garlic butterflies. And for after, the chocolate mousse is so fluffy it's like eating a chocolate cloud. The little girl's smile grew. Garlic butterflies. A chocolate cloud. The woman had taken the scary, fancy food and turned it into a wonderful story. When the little girl reached for her water glass, her napkin slipped from her lap and fluttered to the floor. Before her father could react or call for someone, the server smoothly bent down, picked it up and replaced it with a fresh folded one. "Let me show you a little trick," the woman said softly. She gently took the girl's hands and guided them, showing her how to spread the napkin on her lap so it wouldn't slide off. Her touch was brief, but it was warm and sure. It was a mother's touch. In that moment, under the soft glow of the chandeliers, something inside the little girl shifted. This woman, with her kind eyes and her gentle voice, had seen her. Not just a child at a table, but her. She had spoken her language, the language of kindness and silliness and warmth. It was a feeling the girl had been dreaming of. A feeling she saw in her storybooks but had never truly felt in her own life. She felt safe. She felt seen. She felt for the first time all night like she belonged. The rest of the meal felt different after the server's kindness. The little girl sat up a little straighter. The food arrived and it was delicious. The garlic butterflies were indeed light and buttery, and she ate them with a small smile. Her father watched her, a quiet hope stirring in his chest. Maybe the evening was being saved after all. He tried again to make conversation, asking her if she liked the food, and she would give him a small, polite "Yes, Papa," but the real, glowing joy from before was still missing. He noticed, however, how the little girl's eyes would follow the server whenever she moved through the dining room. He saw the way his daughter's face would brighten just a little whenever the woman came near their table to refill their water or ask if everything was all right. Each time the server would include the girl, giving her another little wink or a warm, genuine smile. The man felt a complicated mix of feelings. He was grateful that this woman was being so kind to his daughter, but a small, quiet part of him also felt a strange pang. He had brought her to this expensive place, he had paid for all of this, but he hadn't been able to bring that look of pure, trusting happiness to her face. This stranger, with just a few kind words and a gentle manner, had done it so easily. The main course was finished, and the plates were cleared away. The server came back to the table, holding 2 small, elegant menus. "And now," she said, her voice cheerful, "the most important part of the evening, the dessert." She turned her full attention to the little girl, her kind eyes crinkling. She leaned in a little, just like before, creating that small, intimate circle of space around them. "For the lovely young lady," she began, her tone full of warm excitement. "May I suggest that—" She never got to finish her sentence. The little girl was looking up at her. The candlelight from the table reflected in her wide, dark eyes. All the feelings of the night, the loneliness, the disappointment, the cold formality, and then the sudden, surprising warmth from this kind woman. All of it swirled together inside her small heart. This woman had spoken to her like she mattered. She had made her feel safe and happy. She had been more of a comfort in these few minutes than anyone had been in a very, very long time. It was a feeling she remembered from a hazy, almost dreamlike past. A feeling of being completely cared for. A feeling that had a single, powerful, beautiful name. Without thinking, without any plan, the word simply rose up from a deep, lonely place inside her and escaped on a breath of pure, heartfelt emotion. She reached out her small hand and gently touched the server's wrist. Her voice was clear as a bell, ringing in the hushed quiet of the restaurant. "Thank you," she said, and then, the word. "Mom." For a single frozen second, the entire world stopped. The server's smile didn't vanish, but it softened into an expression of profound and gentle surprise. Her eyes widened just a little, looking into the earnest, hopeful face of the little girl. She didn't pull her hand away. She simply absorbed the word, understanding the immense weight of it. The man across the table felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. The sound of his own blood pounded in his ears. He heard the word, so small and yet so enormous, and it landed in his heart not like a pebble but like a stone. "Mom." He stared at his daughter's face. He saw the raw, open love shining in her eyes as she looked at the server. He saw the absolute trust, and in that one shocking moment, The invisible wall that had stood between him and his daughter for years shattered into a million pieces. He finally saw it. He saw everything with a painful, breathtaking clarity. He saw that all the money in the world, all the toys, all the private tutors, and even this fancy restaurant were nothing. They were just things. They were empty boxes. He had been giving her beautifully wrapped presents, but inside there was nothing. What she needed was what this stranger had just given her so freely. A moment of true connection. A kind word, a warm touch, a feeling of being seen and cherished. She needed the messy, warm, human language of love that he had never learned to speak. The word mom wasn't about the woman, not really. It was about a role that was empty in her life. It was about a need so deep and so basic that she reached for the first person who made her feel it. And he, her own father, sitting right across from her, had not been that person. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel jealousy. He felt a grief so heavy it was almost physical. It was the grief for all the lost moments, for all the quiet dinners, for all the times he had patted her head instead of hugging her properly. He had built her a golden cage, and he had never realized she was trapped inside, starving for something real. He looked from his daughter's hopeful face to the server's compassionate one, and his own eyes filled with tears. His strong, composed facade, the one he showed to the world in boardrooms and business deals, crumbled away completely, right there in the middle of the fancy restaurant. He was just a man, a father who had just realized in the most heartbreaking way possible how badly he had failed the little girl he loved more than anything in the world. The silence at the table felt thicker than before. The little girl, her small hand still resting on the server's wrist, seemed to realize what she had just said. A slow blush crept up her cheeks. She pulled her hand back quickly, her eyes darting down to her lap in confusion and shyness. The beautiful word now hung in the air, feeling heavy and awkward. The server was the first to move. Her face was still soft with kindness. She gently placed the dessert menu on the table in front of the girl. "That is the sweetest thing anyone has said to me all week," she said, her voice a gentle whisper meant only for the child. "Thank you, my dear. Now you think about which chocolate cloud you'd like, all right?" She gave the girl one last reassuring look before she quietly stepped away, giving the family their space. The man watched her go. He saw the understanding in her eyes. She wasn't offended or shocked. She was a good person who had seen a child's heart, and she had handled it with care. This simple decentness made the knot in his own chest tighten. He looked at his daughter. She was staring hard at her napkin, her small shoulders tense. She was waiting for his reaction. Was he angry? Was he disappointed? She had called another woman Mom. She probably thought she had done something very wrong. He took a slow, deep breath. The sharp pain in his heart was still there, but it was changing. It was turning into something else. A decision, a new kind of strength. He knew that what he did in the next minute would matter more than anything he had ever done in his life. He did not scold her. He did not ask her why she said that. He did not pretend it never happened. Instead, he pushed his heavy chair back. The sound was loud in the quiet. He stood up and walked around the wide table. He didn't stop on the other side. He came right up to her chair, and he knelt down on the expensive restaurant floor, right beside her. His fine suit trousers touched the ground, but he didn't care. He was now at her eye level, just like the server had been. He looked into her worried, shiny eyes. His own eyes were still wet, but he wasn't hiding it. He reached out and put his large, warm hand over her two small ones, which were clenched together in her lap. "That," he said, his voice a little rough but very gentle, "was a very kind thing for you to say." The little girl looked up, surprised. She had been ready for a scolding. He continued, choosing his words with more care than he had ever chosen anything in his business. "You said that because she was so very kind to you, wasn't she?" The girl nodded slowly, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "And you know," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "you are right. Kindness it is the most important thing. More important than any of this." He gestured slightly with his head to the fancy room around them. "I am sorry that I forgot that. I am sorry I have not been more kind." He wasn't just talking about tonight. He was talking about all the quiet dinners, all the pats on the head, all the conversations about schoolwork. He was apologizing for years of a quiet, lonely love. He squeezed her hands. "This was a wonderful idea, coming to dinner with you. The best idea. Thank you for asking me." A new kind of tear filled the little girl's eyes now. These were not tears of fear or sadness, but tears of relief. She unclenched her hands and one of them turned over to hold his. The man didn't get up right away. He stayed there, kneeling beside her for a long moment. They just looked at each other, and for the first time it felt like they were truly seeing one another. The wall was gone. When he finally stood up, he didn't go back to his side of the table. He signaled for the check. He paid the bill, and when the server brought it back, he thanked her. Not just with a nod, but with words. "Thank you," he said, looking directly at her. "For your wonderful service tonight. For your kindness." He meant it with his whole heart. The car ride home was different from the ride there. It was quiet, but it was a soft, comfortable quiet. The little girl leaned her head against the cool window, but this time she had a small, tired smile on her face. Her father didn't look at his phone. He just looked out the window thinking, his mind quieter than it had been in years. When they got back to the big, quiet apartment, he didn't go straight to his office to finish some work. He helped her out of her fancy coat. He asked her if she had liked the garlic butterflies. Then, when she was in her pajamas and ready for bed, he did something he hadn't done since she was very, very small. He sat on the edge of her bed. The nightlight cast a soft glow around the room. He looked at her tucked under the covers, her braids splayed out on the pillow. "That restaurant was too quiet, wasn't it?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes big in the dim light. "Next time," he said, "maybe we can find a place that has spaghetti. The kind you can twirl on your fork. And maybe we can get it on our shirts. That would be okay." A real, genuine giggle escaped her. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. He smiled back, a real easy smile. "So," he began, his voice soft. "Tell me something. What is your very favorite thing to learn about with your tutor? Not what you have to learn. What you actually like." She looked at him, surprised. Then she started to talk. She told him about the planets and about how she thought Jupiter was the most interesting, because it had a giant red spot that was a storm. She talked, and he listened. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. He wasn't building an empire anymore. He was building a bridge, and he was starting one simple, kind question at a time. The castle was no longer a museum. It was finally starting to feel like a home.